Ground Crew Command Radio. The cabal is getting desperate and the signs are everywhere. In the news portion today, we've got the White Hats drop the big one. The JFK files. Are they going straight with Bush Sr., who ordered the quote-unquote wet job on JFK with a mainstream public segue into what JFK was trying to do with the Fed, and are they going to expose the Fed through that route? Is that their plan? And let's not forget the other big move by the White Hats, the real Russian collusion by the Clintons. That's all over Fox News and the alt media, and not a whisper by the cabal establishment media. Positive Military puts UK-based security company G4S in their crosshairs as instrumental in carrying out the Vegas attack. Will the bloodlines in Italy, with the bloodlines in Italy being the final target, and we get down to the bottom of the big threats by the cabal to crash the internet and the financial system to save themselves from the resulting chaos. What's the number one thing that will stop them, and much more in our news portion after tonight's interview. Big interview, of course. We've got Michael Salla of ExoPolitics Institute, of ExoPolitics.org, and of course, Cobra, the official spokesman for the resistance movement, an off-world group with direct information from this off-world group, including the Pleiadians. He is a Pleiadian incarnate himself, and this is one big interview, folks, that quite a few people have been waiting for. It's going to start right on the other side of this very short musical break in a couple of minutes. A lot of news to cover, and of course, Cobra does make a big statement about the 144,000 campaign towards the end of this interview. He promised me this, and that recruitment drive has started. The official page, it is live as of tomorrow. It is at returntoyourtruth.com/14K. That's the numbers 144 letter K. returntoyourtruth.com/144K. It started. This is actually going to happen, folks. And it's very exciting because now it's looking more real than ever. There is a plan proposed for a big initial clearing for the 31st, Halloween, the Holy of Holies, as far as the Luciferians is concerned. And we're going to make, although the 144,000 campaign is in its pre-launch phase to work out all the teething problems, its official launch will be as little as a week away or possibly 2 weeks away, we're going to see. So make sure you go to returntoyourtruth.com/144K. And let's liberate this planet, because our co-creative consciousness, also referred to as mass meditations, it's still undeniably untapped in terms of its vast potential, and it's time for us to really take charge. So, with this huge interview that went on for well over an hour, we're going to go into the most amazing, most intimate details, rarely spoken and rarely put in the right frame, the right context of situations. It'll help. My plan is to help orientate your mind to get things clarified and orientated in terms of what's happened in the past 1 million years. We're going to go deep, all the way to as much as 1 million years in terms of when things started to go south in this solar system and how it led to this situation, and of course, the present time updates. And that's all coming right after the short musical break. But first, let's start off with Dr. Michael E. Salla, PhD, bio, Dr. Michael Salla is a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, the political study of the key factors, institutions, and processes associated with extraterrestrial life. His interest in exopolitics evolved out of his investigation of the sources of international conflict and its relationship to an extraterrestrial presence that is not acknowledged to the general public, elected officials, or even senior military officials. He's authored ExoPolitics, Political Implications of the Extraterrestrial Presence, that came out in 2004. The first published book on exopolitics that explained the political implications of extraterrestrial life. His next book is Exposing US Government Policies on Extraterrestrial Life. That came out in 2009. Then in 2013, he published Galactic Diplomacy, Getting to Yes with ET, How Humanity Can Negotiate with Extraterrestrial Civilizations in a Way That Protects Our Vital Interests. And then in 2013, same year, he published Kennedy's Last Stand, Eisenhower, UFOs, MJ-12, and JFK's assassination. And of course, 2015, he then published Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. And then, if that's not enough, in 2017, he released his latest release, The US Navy's Secret Space Programs and Nordic Extraterrestrial Alliance, where he gets into extensive documentation and supporting the existence through supporting documentation and evidence of a highly advanced US Navy space program capable of interstellar travel. Dr. Salla is a recognized scholar in international politics, conflict resolution, and US foreign policy. He is the author, editor of an additional 4 books, including The Hero's Journey Toward a Second American Century and quite a few others. So that's Dr. Michael Salla. Quite an honor to have one of the foremost leading authorities and experts on this issue on Ground Crew Command Radio. And rest assured, I'm going to make the most of this opportunity, folks, for you, for your empowerment, for your inspiration to keep you going. And of course, Cobra. Cobra is the official spokesperson for the Resistance Movement, an off-world group from Planet X, that is a planet undisclosed to the public within this solar system. He also receives first-hand information from Pleiadian contacts, and his website is 2012portal.blogspot.com. You'll definitely want to check out his website and subscribe onto his website as well for the latest updates. So I promise you're going to get an enormous amount of empowerment and inspiration from this special roundtable between yours truly, Cobra, and Dr. Michael Salla of ExoPolitics Institute. Right on the other side of this short musical break. Don't go anywhere, folks. This is the Unknown Lightwarrior. You're listening to Ground Crew Command Radio. And we're back. You're listening to Ground Crew Command Radio. This is the Unknown Lightwarrior.
And here we go, folks. We've got Michael Salla and Cobra both on the line. And gentlemen, thank you very much for setting aside the time, and well done for setting aside the time, because we all know how much of a premium time is for all of us now. So, Michael, I want to start off with you. I was watching your on DVD your what's it called, MUFON presentation in Vegas. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Oh, that's right, MUFON.
MUFON, and I kept on watching it, and although it didn't have anything new for me personally and for a lot of us, because some of us have gone quite deep down the rabbit hole. One thing I did notice and really appreciate is your very meticulous and heavy emphasis on proof. We're talking perfect, sober, grounded, letter after letter, document after document that you were showing on your slides. And then it was then that I really got and understood what ExoPolitics Institute is really all about. And correct me on this later if I'm wrong, or add to it as you see fit. But I noticed with all this meticulous, emphasis on proof of whatever you can find, I saw that ExoPolitics Institute really is trying to legitimize ET existence in a perfectly 3D, can't deny it kind of way, and our relationship with them to the unconscious mainstream. Okay, and this is something that websites like mine and Cobra's would struggle with, in my opinion, because we tend to present stuff that's way deep down the rabbit hole that the unconscious mainstream understandably isn't really able to accrete. You can't make such a jump and leap into such high levels of consciousness all at once. And, although we all know so passé that ETs exist and so forth, nonetheless, we also knew that the cabal and NSA is been spying on us, right? We all knew this for many years and decades. But look at the impact when Snowden and that faction of the NSA went mainstream, went public and mainstream. It still had a huge impact, even though we already knew about it, It still did a lot for the unconscious majority, which is where the trick is. And so I don't think I'm exaggerating at all in saying that exopolitics.org is really leading the charge to wake up the unconscious majority in a way that people and websites like mine and Cobra can't really, because we put most of the emphasis on the really deep, way down the rabbit hole kind of stuff, whereas yours is strictly physical, 3D sober stuff. So can you go ahead and add what you want to add to that and tell us and the audience what ExoPolitics Institute is really all about and your goal?
Right. Well, it is important that I emphasize that my background is probably very different to Cobra's and others that are interested in this topic. I actually was teaching international politics at a major university in the United States when I got involved in this material and found out that after doing my due diligence, I found out that it was very real. And I became excited by this as really a new field of international politics, political science, and I really wanted to convince my peers, the people that I had worked with or students that I had taught, that this material was real. I didn't succeed when I first introduced this. I actually did present this material in a class at American University in 2001, and it didn't persuade any.
No, go ahead and finish.
It didn't persuade any of the students that this was real. In fact, out of a class of 25 students who were kind of liberal progressives, who had very kind of humanitarian backgrounds in terms of what they had done before starting graduate degrees in conflict resolution, only 2 of the class of 25 thought that the material that I had shown in terms of Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project press conference was real. So right there, the challenge, as I saw it, was to be able to persuade, as you said, the kind of unconscious mainstream that this is very real. And so my website, ExoPolitics.org, and the ExoPolitics Institute that I created in 2005, both of those are really trying to open up this material to a kind of unconscious or unaware mainstream, and I continue to address that particular constituency.
Okay, well, I commend you and salute you for trying to show this stuff to the rigidly left brain hemisphere orientated academia. That's no mean feat, and I take my hat off to you sincerely. That's not easy, because they're really, they're some of the most, this might ruffle a few feathers, but I'll say this with all due respect, they're some of the most programmed people, academia, people that have gone to the highest levels of academia. And, David Icke would say there's a reason why the cabal structured academia in a way where it's strictly left hemisphere, again, for control. And look, it's understandable, we've had, you must be watching very closely the white hat takedown of cabal control of media, Hollywood, academia, even NFL and sports, according to Ben Fulford's sources. And I'm quite confident that certainly the alternative media, particularly the larger names such as InfoWars, Daily Caller, Breitbart, and even Fox, have been doing a pretty good job exposing the deep state. If they weren't so busy and having to heavily focus all their airtime and attention on taking down, the deep state to expose all of this stuff, that'll eventually lead to the mass arrests. I do believe if it wasn't for that and all that devotion to that, I do believe that would have you on. They'd be willing to have someone like you on, because you're presenting it in a way that the unconscious majority can grasp, with perfectly 3D, strictly within the physical plane. And of course, when it comes to the US president, eventually making that announcement, hopefully in the very near future, that yes, ETs exist, guess who's everyone going to be Googling? Okay. They'll be Googling websites like yours. Now, what do you say to that? Have you ever thought about things that way?
Well, I have been made aware that Alex Jones is knowledgeable about the kind of material I've been putting out, but I think he is very aware that his audience still aren't really receptive to this, which basically shows that even within that constituency, which is aware of things like false flag operations and kind of like pedophilia and kind of corruption of the political elite, that even that segment of humanity, the kind of the InfoWars kind of audience, that even them with that kind of receptiveness are still quite closed to this extraterrestrial phenomenon. And so he has been very careful in terms of how he presents this material. I know he's had people like David Icke and Jim Mars on his show, but never really kind of encouraged them to go really deeply into the whole ET thing, even though both of them were very knowledgeable. Of course, Jim Mars just recently passed away.
Yeah.
But yes, I do imagine that in future I probably will get to talk with Alex Jones on these topics and be presenting it within a framework that his audience will find acceptable.
Yeah, well, I was about to actually mention InfoWars. I mean, it's pretty safe to say Alex Jones knows all about this stuff, including the whole InfoWars reporters. There's no doubt about that. But the good news is that for anyone who actually watches InfoWars, I would say around about once every 3 or 4 months, the positive military, let's face it, through InfoWars, they do sometimes dip their toe in the water to see the audience reaction with some out there esoteric stuff, just to see what happens, whether that constituency is ready or not. An example off the top of my head, they did reveal the existence of Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. They did do a piece on that and then left it alone. So if you pay attention, you'll see they do dip their toes in every once in a while to see when people are ready. But once again, it's understandable that they've got a lot of work and have to focus all their airtime on exposing the usual shenanigans of the cabal through the deep state. So they're doing their piece of the puzzle, no doubt. Cobra. Let's get into some history, gentlemen, because for the longest time, we, in the Awake and Aware community, up until very recently, with Corey Good and David Wilcock, I think, with their information in the past year or two, many of us just assumed or thought that it was primarily a reptilian or draconian, reptoid kind of takeover of the planet, at least on the physical plane. And this is excluding the etheric plane and the archons and so forth. And we've recently, and thanks to Corey Good and David Wilcock, they've popularized, shall I say, the awareness that no, it's actually also, if not primarily, the so-called pre-Adamites, these giant humans with elongated skulls. And they're the actual ancestors of the 13 bloodline families. So feel free to add anything to that, gentlemen, after I ask this following question, which is, when did each group arrive here? And you can start with any group you want, Cobra, or Michael, if you've been...
Okay. Those so-called pre-Adamites, actually, many people were speaking about this in different ways. This is a name for the group which actually formed the Illuminati. It's the core of the group is coming from the Andromeda Galaxy, and I was speaking about this group in a different name many times in my blog. So this is not something new. It is something actually that was discussed a lot in the last few decades.
Well, what name did you give it, just so people have a reference point?
Archon families.
Archon families.
Yes, black nobility. This is the same source, the same group.
Okay, so to clarify, these Archon families, are they incarnated on the physical plane as these giants with elongated skulls?
Okay, you have the physical ones and the non-physical ones, and the physical ones tend to incarnate in certain bloodlines, certain families, and most of those families are concentrated in Italy. So they are in the hierarchy. They are high above all the usual suspects of the Cabal network, and they are controlling them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those bloodlines go back to the Roman Empire, to the even further back. So they have proof of genetic lineage going back, some of them to the ancient Egypt, for example.
Yeah.
And basically the same families were controlling Atlantis and were so-called the dark magicians of Atlantis.
Okay. So there's actual descendants of these giants, these pre-Adamites with elongated skulls, just to clarify.
Actually, in Atlantis, the giant race was much more frequent than it is now, and then it was slowly exterminated. And from generation to generation, the genetic makeup changed, and the height of those beings decreased. And you can still see in some ancient excavations, you can see depictions of those giants and people with elongated skulls. You can see that very clearly.
Okay. And these are, based on your information, incarnated archons, generally, or all of them, or some of them, or?
All of them, actually. It's a group. It's a very specific, distinct group, which does not interact much with outside world in a way. They have their own unique, they behave in a certain way, they think in a certain way. It's a distinct species, actually.
Well, there's no doubt they certainly perfected the art of sociopathism. That much we can say for certain.
Yes, exactly. One of the things that happened to them is they have been following the wrong course of evolution, and as a consequence, sociopathy is one of their main characteristics.
No doubt. Okay, so based on Corey's information, they were literally chased here several times. Like they resided on Mars. There was a war there that caused a complete destruction of Maldek, also known as Tiamat, the super Earth. And then they fled to the rings of Saturn. They were attacked there again. Then they fled to the moon, had a base on the moon for a long time, hundreds of thousands of years apparently. They got attacked there, and then they fled to Antarctica, which many of you know the story by now, and with only 3 ships remaining, and literally crash landed in the lush vegetation. And before I get you to clarify that story or add any corrections, now this happened about 50 to 60,000 years ago. So now the non-physical Archon invasion occurred, from what we've been told, 26,000 years ago. So can you marry that up, if you will, for the audience, Cobra? And Michael, yes, feel free to chip in if you have any intel on this as well.
Basically, there were waves of Archon invasions happening before the time I specified. The first one was the arrival of the dark forces into the solar system, which was a little bit less than 1 million years ago. And they entered from the Orion constellation, the Rigelians from the Orion constellation, and the core of the Rigelians actually came from the Andromeda Galaxy. And some of the Archons already arrived on planet Earth within the Atlantean times. As I said before, they were actually, some of them were even the rulers of Atlantis, or rulers of the Dark Lodge in Atlantis.
So these initial Archons, yes, they arrived here prior to 26,000 years ago?
Yes, those initial Archons arrived here a little bit less, I would say around 900,000 years ago. They have entered the solar system. They have put their bases on the moons of Saturn. They have put their bases on Mars. There was fighting involved because there were other groups in the solar system with their own interests. They have put the bases on the moon. They have landed in Antarctica and finally arrived in Atlantis. Actually, one group descended in Congo, one group descended in Antarctica, and then slowly migrated to Atlantis because Atlantis was at that time a tropical paradise. And of course, there was a very dynamic history in the last millions of years with both light and dark factions, sometimes winning, sometimes losing, until 25,000 or 36,000 years ago. There was this final, I would say the final invasion that sealed the fate of the planet for the last 26,000 years because they have freed the quarantine. They have made planet Earth actually a dark planet. With everybody just recycling through the incarnation process, nobody allowing to go in and out, except when allowed by the Archons and by the Chimera group. The Chimera group was basically, most of the time, just observing this behind the scenes. They have not intervened much in human history. They have intervened only when there was a real possibility of breaking up of the quarantine status. And this is what's happening now. They were controlling the whole narrative for the whole time. The Chimera group was one of the top, and still is one of the top.
Okay. So for about 1 million years, there was a back and forth battle over the solar system and over Earth.
Yes.
But it wasn't until 26,000 years ago that a significant invasion of, as I understand it, non-physical Archons had taken place.
There were significant invasions before, but they were not complete. The invasion 26,000 years was a complete invasion, which was both physical and non-physical.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Now, the reptilian races, the Dracos and Reptilians, when did they arrive to this planet?
It was an entourage. Actually, the Archons and the Chimera were leading the way, and they were actually importing the reptilian Draco slaves from the Orion star systems. You see, the Dracos were like the middlemen, like the strategists, the military commanders, the slave holders.
Okay, and the Archons and the Chimera were above them, commanding them, basically, really calling the shots. Okay, so the Chimera, so they're all basically arrived at similar time periods over the last 1 million years into the solar system, anyway. And go ahead.
I was just going to add that, as I understand it, that there are kind of like 3 factions in terms of the whole extraterrestrial question, and this is my understanding, and Cobra can maybe comment on how that dovetails with his, but I think that the reptilian presence was probably on Earth the longest of any life form. They've been around here for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at the dinosaurs, and I mean, quite clearly, archaeologists have been able to kind of establish that the likelihood of intelligent kind of dinosaurs or raptors, that these beings could have naturally evolved on Earth millions of years ago. And so I think that there's good reason to say that the reptilians were probably one of the original kind of intelligent species on the Earth. Then for some reason, the dinosaurs were wiped out, some cataclysm, and I think that's when the human extraterrestrials came along and basically began seeding humanity on the planet. Maybe they were altering some of the kind of early hominoids on the planet, and they began to multiple experiments. And Alex Collier, Corey Good have both talked about 22 long-term genetic experiments over a period of roughly 500,000 years. And there's a lot of data supporting that. We do have multiple ET groups that have been interfering. Arthur Horn wrote a book called Humanity's Extraterrestrial Origins, where he kind of goes into how the different ET groups have at certain points kind of intervened genetically. And then the final group, I think, people call them the Anunnaki, or maybe you can call them the pre-Adamites. But I think there's good reason to think that these are beings that came in that kind of like 50,000 years ago or so, and established the kind of new ruling elite that they had hybrids created, a lot of intermarriage, and kind of like the Book of Enoch describes that, like these are the fallen angels, and I think there's good reason I think that maybe these are the ones that Corey Good has talked about as came here via the moon, but previously from Mars or from Maldek, and that these three groups have, I think, been kind of like competing against each other for influence and domination over the planet. I think the human-looking extraterrestrials tend to do things more from behind the scenes. They tend to kind of, I think, just tinker with human genetics and see how we are able to respond to the kind of more overt interference by the reptilians, and then these pre-Adamites who I think I agree with Cobra that they are the kind of ruling elites, or at least that their genetics are what the cabal share.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, here I have to say something, explain something about the reptilians. Mm-hmm. There are different types of reptilians. There were so-called native reptilians that were part of the Earth evolution that evolved here through many geological ages, and the dinosaurs were part of that, I would say, native group that was native to this planet. It is true that they were destroyed in a cataclysm, but there was one faction of those native reptilians that survived below the surface of the planet, and they were inhabiting many caves and underground. They were inhabiting areas along underground rivers and lakes. And then about 1 million years ago, I said there was an invasion, and along with the Archon families and the Dracos, many Orion reptilians came, and the Orion reptilians are much more warlike. And they had infested the whole reptilian population underground with that warlike mentality. So the native reptilians that were here before are not the same anymore. They have actually joined this big warlike meme that exists among the reptilian race, and they consider this to be their planet, and they consider humans to be invaders. And this is the main conflict between the reptilian and human race. And actually, it is not easy to resolve this conflict, but finally it will be resolved because there are not many reptilians left on the planet, almost zero on the surface and very little below the surface. And reptilian race, one part of the reptilian race will reform back into the light. They will become peaceful and beings that will respect the will of the others, and but the rest of the reptilian race will have to go to the central sun. So this is one of the issues that needs to be addressed here. Yeah,
well, yes, many of us have heard about complaints basically from the reptilian and Drago factions saying that no, they were here first doing their genetic experimentation, and their own version of the grand experiment, as Corey Good calls it, with regards to the grand experiment that the human ETs started apparently sometime after that. So, Michael, unless you have anything to say to that?
Well, I think this is. I think it is an important issue in terms of what are the reptilians doing on the planet. I think that there are a lot of reptilian shapeshifters that live amongst us, and that this is going to be part of the problem that we are going to have to face as a species when disclosure happens. That these reptilians are going to reveal themselves, and they have an ancient claim to the planet. They were once living on the surface, and they will invoke that and say, well, we want to live openly again on the surface. And I think humanity will have to learn, the ideas of coexistence with this foreign race, and I think that's going to be a real challenge for a lot of people, because I think, and I agree with Cobra, that there has been a kind of off-world reptilian species that has come in, the Draconians, and that they have created a lot of problems. They're a very aggressive, imperialistic race, and people assume that all reptilians are kind of like draconian, kind of barbaric, beings that have been just exploiting humanity. But I think that there are quite a number of reptilian shapeshifters who do live amongst us, and that when disclosure happens, people are going to have to get used to the idea that some of these beings are going to want to be integrated into this kind of new society, this new Earth, that it's not just going to be a homogenous human population, that we're going to have to deal with kind of like reptilians, humans, and other off-world beings that suddenly kind of like come out of the shadows and say, there's no need anymore for us to kind of hide ourselves. Now here we are, and how are you going to deal with us?
Well, here's the thing: these reptilians, whatever there's left of them on the physical plane, even those ones that are disguised as humans, whether it's done through technology or actual shape-shifting, if that can be done in any physical way.
I need to say something. It is not like there suddenly will be beings with tails and shape-shifting walking around the planet. Mm-hmm. But there is a certain part of the reptilian race which incarnated, so the reptilian soul is incarnated within the humanoid body. So it looks like a normal human, but his psychological makeup, the feelings, the emotions, the thoughts, the perception is reptilian. And you can find many of those reptilians among mercenaries. They tend to gravitate towards that kind of professions.
Yeah. Well, either way, they're just going to have to accept the fact that if they don't respect and honour free will and prosperity and freedom and the human propensity to make love half the time and so forth, we don't care how long they've been here for. They either respect free will and grow in consciousness and grow a heart chakra, dare I say, or we will continue to be at war with them.
Anybody that will not respect free will have to go. This will be a planet of respectful free will. It will not be an experiment when everything is allowed anymore. This is over. It's not going to be allowed anymore.
Yeah. I don't see all the positive factions on the surface, let alone the SSP Alliance, let alone the Galactic Confederation and the Sphere beings tolerating infringement upon free will any further. Overtly or covertly. I'm sure we'll all agree on that one.
Can I just add to that? I do agree with that this will be a planet of free will, and just the extent to which our planet or humanity is mind controlled, so that people kind of dumb down. That this is one of the things that I was talking with William Tompkins about quite a bit, and he said that basically what the Navy was aware of, the US Navy, and is that essentially the reptilians have these tanker ships in the upper atmosphere spraying all these noxious gases into the atmosphere deliberately around populated areas or wherever there's a kind of an awakening, and just dumbing people down. So all of a sudden, they forget about whatever progressive ideas or experiments that they may have launched. Well, I think, when we have this kind of full disclosure, that's going to be stopped. And I think once you have that, once you have that manipulation stopped, where these noxious gases are not pumped into the air and into the water and into the kind of food supply, that I think humanity is going to wake up from this kind of long slumber. And I think that, we can truly enter a kind of paradise compared to where we are now. Once you have this kind of negative influence by the reptilians and, these controlling groups, these bloodline families.
Okay, well, let's Cobra, you get a lot of first-hand regular intel about this sort of thing directly from the resistance movement, being the off-world group that you represent on the surface here. Have a lot of these craft, reptilian or chimera or even dark fleet craft that used to do this sort of spraying in the upper atmosphere, have a lot of them been taken out now?
You see, the number is constantly changing. There is a dynamic going on. It's actually a battle going, a war going on, especially in the low Earth orbit, which is not detected because all those ships are cloaked. And the number is constantly changing because the low Earth orbit area has not been liberated yet. And most of those ships are, I would say some of those ships are commanded by the Draco personnel. Some of them are different secret space program factions, but all of them are controlled by the Chimera. And the purpose, the main aim of the Chimera is to defend quarantine status. They do not want this planet to liberate. They see this as an invasion. They see the Galactic Confederation forces as invaders that are invading their planet and interfering in the way they handle their so-called slaves. This is how they see it.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to that pretty soon regarding the various fleets that are still out there, both good and bad. But what I want to do first is quickly bring us forward a fair bit in history. And, one of the most popular stands against bloodline rule, these descendants of these pre-Adamites, if you will, has been the American Revolutionary War, where the 13 colonies, very openly, bravely stood and said no to bloodline rule, being led by positive Freemasons, being the founding fathers. But one thing that isn't spoken about, and hasn't been giving its due in terms of recognition, and a very under-recognized, forgotten thing, is the English Civil War that was fought in the 1640s. Oliver Cromwell and his parliamentarian armies against the bloodline ruling king at the time. And Cobra, maybe you'll have the answer for this. Is there any connection between, well, first of all, was Oliver Cromwell's side of the English Civil War, were they actually influenced behind the scenes by either white nobility or positive Freemasons? And do any of these white nobility families and or positive Freemasons have any connection to the American Revolutionary War and the positive Freemasons there with the founding fathers?
Yes, actually, first I will speak about the English Revolutionary War. There was a positive influence of certain Rosicrucian groups behind the scenes, and certain positive white nobility families that wanted to do exactly that, to end the bloodline rule. And this was not as successful as they had hoped.
But then 8 years later, probably through black magic, bribery, assassinations, hexes, curses, spells, we know how they roll, they managed to claw their way back into influence and stick another, well, in this case, the Saxe-Coburg line.
Basically, it was not successful enough because the bloodlines still ruled behind the scenes, or sometimes even directly. It was not what they hoped for. So the Light Forces created a more thorough plan, which they carried out through certain positive Freemason groups that actually started in France in the year 70-75. That was a decisive year because there were certain lodges created in Paris, and Saint-Germain was the force behind those lodges, in connection with Benjamin Franklin. That started this independence movement within the United States, and the Constitution of the United States was stated in a way that if it would be completely respected, would erase the cabal from the United States. And this is why the cabal is so allergic to constitution, because it protects sovereign individual and it protects a sovereign state based on a group of sovereign individuals. And this particular project of the light forces was successful to a certain degree. And if without that project, we would be in the Middle Ages right now.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, that dovetails really nicely to my next question, which is Napoleon Bonaparte. Who was he really working for? You know, was it actually genuine attempts by, as I understand it, a positive French Freemason lodge to throw off bloodline rule in Europe, and then the world for that matter, because the bloodlines colonized all the other continents by then, or was it really just working for the Jesuits?
Actually, it was a war between Jesuits and the Rothschilds, and actually he was working for the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds were against the church, although they were working for the church. They were collecting the cash for the Jesuits, but they have a strong tension with the Jesuits, and they had their idea of unified Europe. It's a Rothschild idea, basically. And this is what Napoleon wanted to create, a European Union, that would be also a monetary union, that would collect cash for the Rothschilds, that they would have to give most of it to the Jesuits. But there was always a strong tension between the Jesuits and the Rothschilds. And this reflected in the Napoleon Wars.
Okay.
There were, of course, Freemason groups that supported Napoleon, and there were other groups that were not, that were supporting the Jesuits. And there was a constant tension there also.
Okay. Interesting. Well, obviously they succeeded with their European Union, as we all know by now.
We have to say that the Light Forces also benefited from this plan, because European Union is a two-edged sword. It's not all bad or good. It can promote under certain circumstances, it can promote growth and development. But it can also be misused. So what is happening now in Spain, we all can see how this can turn sour.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say that I do like to look at the kind of historical evolution of forces as kind of like being more a trinary kind of dynamic as opposed to two groups, two dominant groups, and I think that one group, the more positive group, does tend to work through just kind of implanting certain ideas or ideals into human consciousness and working with kind of like gifted people to promote those ideas. And I think to begin with, I think Napoleon was overlighted, if you like, by these more positive groups with these ideals of kind of like self-determination and republicanism, and that really did inspire millions all around the European continent. I mean, that's why he was able to have, those stunning military successes, because he did get so much support from the peoples all over Europe. And he had the potential to kind of like carry it, into the Middle East and so forth. I mean, he went into Egypt and so forth. But, the reactionary forces did kind of step in. And I think Napoleon, out of, often just kind of good intentions, thought that, the answer would be by him kind of aggrandizing power around himself. And so, he became emperor. And I think that's truly when he went over to the dark side. But I think at the beginning, he did play a role as a kind of spreading these, more evolutionary ideas and helped republicanism and kind of self-determination take off in Europe and around the world in the 1800s.
Yeah, because I have heard, briefly here and there that it was, a move to throw off the rule across all of Europe of these incestuous royal families, most of whom are, descendants of, so-called, or some of them, if not most of them, descendants of the so-called pre-Adamites. So having said that, I just want to get into another question for both of you. Did the 13 bloodlines, the black nobility, lose control of the Nazis, and Hitler in particular, to their quote-unquote enemies, the Dracos? Because we know about the Draco influence and, if not, major control over the Nazis. Now, the reason why I'm asking this question was, again, for the longest time, we thought that those 3 pre-Adamite ships, these giants with elongated skulls that crash landed in Antarctica 50, 60,000 years ago, I admit, even I assumed that it was positive ETs that were chasing them across the solar system, trying to end them. Understandably, I'm sure a lot of us assumed that. But no, it was the Dracos that were chasing them all over the place and chased them here as well. And it was then that many of us understood, okay, this is a long established, intense rivalry between 2 negative ET groups and their descendants for that matter. So that's why I'm posing this question to either of you two. Was it a case that the 13 bloodlines, black nobility, did they actually, because initially they supported Hitler, they were financing him initially, but then Hitler started to do, not to, approve of anything about them for heaven's sake, but then he started, printing his own currency, right? So he wasn't playing by the rules anymore. And then, of course, we know about the close connections between the Nazi SS secret space program and the Draco influence with that, and that's where the two kind of merged. So I know that's a long-winded way of asking that question to either of you two. Was this the case? Did the 13 bloodlines lose control? Did they have control and then lose control of Hitler and the Nazis to their enemies, the Dracos?
Okay, the situation is a little bit more complex. It is not just about Hitler, it's about everything that was happening in Germany. And Germany is a very special case in the history of the 19th and 20th century. Actually, before Germany was unified, there was a country called Prussia. Yeah. And Prussia was part of the later Germany, and that country had a very strong industry. It was scientifically very advanced. And this is where the first secret space programs started in the 19th century already. It's 1820, 1830, the first things moved already. Long before they established, it was all secret. It was military compartment, it was military secret programs that very few people knew about.
Was this even before the Franco-Prussian War of 1871?
Yes. Yes, it was long time before, and Prussian military was one of the most advanced militaries at that time. And what happened is that the Pleiadians saw an opportunity to introduce the seeds of a positive secret space program, and they have telepathically contacted many people in Germany, inspiring them to start building their own spaceships. And that was happening in the 19th century already. And of course, the first prototypes were very crude, they did not work. And then in the beginning of the 20th century, they have contacted Maria Orsic. And I hope we are familiar with the story of Maria Orsic. Yeah. She was a medium, she was a channel, she channeled Pleiadians from the Aldebaran star system. And she was invited in a certain group which is called the Thule Society, and then later the Real Society. And this is how the German secret space program started. And first, the Rothschilds infiltrated the group through Hitler. There was one man that was part of the group, actually one of the founders of the group, which was Rudolf Glauer. He called himself Baron von Servotendorf. And he was connected very deeply with very deep occult forces in Turkey. And those forces were, I will not go much deeper into this, but those forces were steering the narrative since then. And then we have Karl Haushofer, one of those Germans, and he traveled a lot into the east. And when the Chimera group was, of course, watching all the development, and when they saw that this German program has the potential for a breakthrough, there was a real possibility they will build a building operational spacecraft that will counter the Pleiadians and make a first contact, which could be public. They have decided to intervene. So they sent Draco faction from Tibet into contact with Haushofer. And Haushofer came back then to Germany. He was in contact with Hitler, and this is how the green man started to control Hitler. It was the Dracos. And Hitler signed a pact with Dracos. And of course, this was not the only group that was influencing Hitler. The Rothschilds were in the play, the Jesuits were in the play. You probably know about the big Jesuit pentagram of concentration camps. So each of those factions have their own idea what will happen in that war. The Jesuits wanted to have concentration camps, the Rothschilds wanted to earn money, the Dracos wanted to control the planet through Hitler, the Chimera group wanted to control the quarantine, and then the Pleiadians, there is a story about the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians saw what's happening, and they wanted to prevent the genocide. And before the World War II, the Pleiadians signed a contract with Hitler. They promised him technology in exchange that Hitler will not start the genocide. So this was their last attempt to prevent the genocide. When this did not happen, they cut all contact with Hitler and with the Nazis. That was, I think, in 1941 or 1942. And then the Dracos gave technology to Hitler. So it was actually a proxy war between the Draco and the Confederation. And through this proxy war, the World War II, much of the galaxy was cleared. It was like part of the Galactic War, which had its anchor on the physical plane on planet Earth. And the Confederation had a partial victory, and the Nazis had to go underground. So part of them went to Antarctica, and part of them went to the United States through Operation Paperclip. And now you have the key Nazis controlling the United States. That's what's happening. And this is the so-called cabal. They are, of course, merged with the bloodlines. Many of them belong to the bloodlines, or now, of course, they work with the bloodlines.
I see. Now, Michael, before I get you in on that, I've always had, let's just call it, that Hitler was just showing just too much independence, albeit within the yoke of Draco backing, if not a complete Draco control, and that. Like, I want to know the position of the actual 13 bloodlines in all of this, because I've always suspected that they lost control of Hitler and the Nazis, and that's when they started funding and putting everything they had into the Allies, US, UK, USSR, to crush something that they lost control of. Is that the case? How accurate is that?
I do think that Hitler basically went off the script that the bloodline families did set him up, the elites, industrialists within the Thule Society that put Hitler in power, thought that they could control him. And when they found that they couldn't, that he was ready to kind of start these aggressive wars, they were prepared to move against him. That it's actually documented that, for example, Wilhelm Canaris, who was the admiral in charge of German military intelligence, and other German industrialists were ready to depose Hitler over the Czech crisis, and that they were caught off guard with the peace agreement that was reached between Chamberlain and Hitler, because that basically strengthened Hitler's hand. And so Hitler then, now his position was unassailable in the German political scene, and he went on to invade Poland, and the rest is history. But I think what happened was that because of his aggressiveness, and I think he was following the script that the Draconians were giving him, that the bloodline families or the Thule Society people, that they really put all of their stock into the Antarctica program and moved a lot of their people and resources down there, and kind of like kept a lot of the developments down there away from Hitler, and certainly didn't share the most advanced technologies they had there, which Hitler planned to use for the war effort. So they kind of denied him that, and in the sense that that contributed to Germany losing the war. But then the Nazis did, through Operation Paperclip, they were able to infiltrate the United States and basically assert a Fourth Reich with the cooperation of the German elites or the German space program out of Antarctica.
Okay, Cobra, last word on what was it a case of the 13 bloodlines, the black nobility, losing control of Hitler and the Nazis, and then using and backing the US, UK, and USSR to crush him? What was that? What happened? Was that the case?
I don't see it this way. I see it like they always do. They wanted the war. They wanted the conflict. They wanted because the Rothschilds were making the money out of it. Everybody was gaining something for their objective. They wanted this war, and they didn't care about Hitler or Nazis. For them, it's just one side of the conflict. And there were factories in the United States producing weapons for Germany, for example.
Yes.
Things like that happening. So it was in their interest for this to happen. When they saw that Germany will lose the war, they have flipped the script. They have just made a plan for a surrender of Germany, infiltration of Nazis in the United States, removal of the most sensitive programs to Antarctica, and everybody was happy.
Okay. So they weren't, the black nobility, from their perspective, they weren't nervous about Hitler and the Nazis taking over when they're working for the Dracos, their long-time rivalry from God knows how long.
Because they had the same objective, although from a different perspective. It's like there's always rivalry between Dracos and the black nobility, but that rivalry is not like a question of survival. They are on the same page. The real conflict, the real polarization is between the light and the dark forces. The dark factions, actually, many times they can agree better than the light factions.
Yeah, I was about to say they often work together when it suits their goals. Okay, one thing I do want to make sure we don't leave before we move on is who specifically, now the Holocaust, as I understand it, was almost strictly a Jesuit operation. If that's the case, who specifically did the Jesuits sacrifice all those Holocaust victims for?
They were worshipping an entity called Moloch, and this is they wanted to actually create a portal through which they would turn planet Earth into a dark planet. They wanted to reintroduce the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, actually.
Yep, definitely. Okay, moving on. Okay, whoops, lost my part in that. Okay, here we go. Now, Michael, do you have any status updates or any recent information regarding the lower level, what David Wilcock has called the lower level military industrial complex secret space program, as well as the US Navy's role in all this? Meaning, are they both one and the same thing, or is the MIC SSP a separate fraction from the US Navy's SSP?
I think that is the case, that the MIC, or the kind of like the Air Force run secret space program, is very different to what the Navy had set up. Mm-hmm. I think the Air Force program really is much more focused on kind of Earth surveillance and monitoring nearby traffic, and maybe some minor missions to the moon, maybe to Mars, but using their TR-3 craft. But I don't think they have the most advanced technologies involving kind of interstellar space carriers, and with crews that are on these 20 and back programs, that's what the Navy has been doing for decades now. But I think what we are seeing at the moment is the slow rollout of the Air Force SSP, that this is what they want to do because I think that they feel that in rolling out that program that they're going to get more funding and that maybe they'll get better technology, because I do believe that many, due to compartmentalization, that the Air Force secret space program people aren't aware of what the Navy has achieved. Mm-hmm. And while I think that, due to, inter-kind of services rivalry and compartmentalization, they don't believe the Navy has a space program. I think there is a suspicion that this is real. There have been some credible people that have come out, and just most recently there's a person who's just come out. I mean, just yesterday actually, the first video interview was released of Michael Gerloff, who actually was part of the Space Marines. He did serve in a 20 and back program, and what makes him different to the other 20 and back people who have come out is that he has a lot of documents that he has made available to be released. And so over the course of this video series that I'm doing with him, I'll be releasing more of these documents, and that they show that he was someone that is someone that should be taken very seriously. And I think he is the catalyst for many more people who served for the Navy space program to come forward. And I think that's going to lead to the Air Force disclosure narrative to kind of shift, to broaden a little bit, because I think they're going to realize that they've been manipulated as well.
I see. Okay. Well, it's great to hear that you're continuing to collect evidence and proof and testimony on video and so forth. That's really great to see.
I have a few things here to say about the situation. First, about this new whistleblower that came on his documents. There was a certain document called Mars Ground, and I have to say this has nothing to do with planet Mars. It is simply a military auxiliary radio system. It's a radio system that some radio amateurs can use to support the military operations, and it has nothing to do with planet Mars. I have to say that.
Okay, fair enough.
Also, other thing that I need to say is that the Navy's secret space program was supported by the Galactic, and still is supported by the Galactic Confederation. I will say the concentration applied within the Navy space program is much higher than in the Air Force space program. And so we again have this tension, which is a part of the, I would say, proxy war between the Chimera and the Confederation. The Chimera group trying to steer the narrative through the Air Force space program. And the reason why the Air Force is so much focused now on increasing the low Earth orbit activity and increasing the military presence in low Earth orbit, because they are afraid, again, of end of quarantine status. They are afraid of so-called quote-unquote invasion of the Galactic Confederation. They have actually issued some memos about this.
Okay, cool. Is it true that the lower level MIC SSP, that I believe is controlled by a positive faction, has recently built and used in combat advanced spacecraft every bit as good as the Dark Fleets and the Drogo fleet? And the example that you'll both know about is, I think it was January 2016, when the Dark Fleet tried to take off from Antarctica, carrying a significant number of actual Cabal members trying to get off the planet, and they were attacked by those chevron-shaped craft, which is believed to be lower-level MIC SSP.
Basically, U.S. is not the only country that has a secret space program. Also, Russians and the Chinese have their own space program, and I would say the Positive Alliance is supporting the Chinese and the Russian space program quite much.
Okay. Michael? Do you have any?
Yes, similarly, that's the information I got, that those ships that were used in Antarctica against the Dark Fleet, that they belong to the Earth Alliance, and that the Russians and other nations within the BRICS alliance were responsible for that. But that's very different to the Air Force program. That the Air Force don't have that kind of advanced technology. That their technology is still very primitive compared to what the corporations have up there and what the Navy has up there. But I do want to point out that that the Air Force space program, or those involved in this disclosure narrative coming from the Air Force, there's been a major shift in that. Earlier this year there was a document released that was leaked from the Defence Intelligence Agency, and for the first time the Air Force and the Defence Intelligence Agency community, that they were talking about human-looking extraterrestrials. This has never happened before with any of the other majestic documents. None of them have ever talked about extraterrestrials other than greys. But now with this new document that's come forward, now the Defence Intelligence Agency is talking about Tesla, and talking about human extraterrestrials that have entered into diplomatic relations with Eisenhower and so forth. So I think what we're seeing is a kind of convergence in terms of the kind of disclosure initiative that the Navy is pursuing and what the Air Force is prepared to accept. So that's very encouraging, because I think that the people in the Air Force are starting to accept some of the Navy people's narrative.
Okay, interesting. Well, yeah, that is encouraging. Now, Cobra, I know you don't like to talk numbers and percentages and that, but I just couldn't resist. Well, from both of you, what's your most recent or last intel on actual numbers left with regards to the Dark Fleet and the Draco Fleet? Like, are they both still significant fighting forces now, as far as low Earth orbit and surface is concerned?
Right. Well, according to the Corey Goods information, the Dark Fleet has kind of been decimated because of this kind of solar system-wide quarantine that has prevented reinforcements coming in, and that it really is just the interplanetary corporate conglomerate that has been kind of in the ascendancy as far as the most advanced technologies that the kind of dark side or the Rothschild factions can deploy out there. But they're losing power. I mean, what you described in terms of Antarctica in 2016, I think was a big shock to them, that there was a human space program that wasn't controlled by the corporations or Dark Fleet that was as advanced as them. This was not something.
And this was Earth Alliance we're talking about, right? Was it the Earth Alliance that attacked them? Yeah, that's the different story from the SSP Alliance, the former Solar Warden, as I understand it. So that's a big deal.
That's right, yeah. The Navy Solar Warden program just operates in deep space, that they don't have any kind of meaningful role to play as far as what's happening around the Earth. That's typically been the Air Force's domain of operations. But the Air Force doesn't have any kind of technology to counter what the interplanetary corporate conglomerate can do, or what the Dark Fleet has been doing. And so they kind of had free reign to come and go as they please. But now with this Earth Alliance, the dynamic has changed significantly.
Yeah, go ahead, Cobra.
Okay, I will not put any numbers for obvious reasons. The reason I don't want to give any numbers is we are not the only ones listening to this show, and some of the information is sensitive. But I would say there will be more and more focus on low Earth orbit operations. A lot will be happening in the low Earth orbit, and it will become more and more public. Various interest groups, various factions will put will want to put their presence there because it's the last line of defense before the planetary liberation. So we will see a lot of news about that in the near future. And various so-called secret space program factions will begin and have to begin to communicate with each other. And because more and more of this is already revealed, it has been leaked and released to the general population. So also people in various positions within those programs are forced by the situation to begin to cooperate one way or the other. So all this will be part of the disclosure process, one way or the other.
Okay, so for now at least, the Dark Fleet and the Draco Fleet, they're still a significant force in the low Earth orbit and surface area?
Parts of Dark Fleet and Draco Fleet are under complete command of the Chimera, but it's decreasing very fast.
Okay. People appreciate hearing that. Not out of fear, but just out of, this whole thing's been taking a while, so for the sake of inspiration and motivation, I guess, which is certainly what Ground Crew Command is all about. Now, the Chimera themselves, do they still have any sizable fleet left, or are they only left with portal use? Or are they the ones that have strict control over the Draco Fleet and Dark Fleet?
Okay, they are at the very top. They have a few elite craft that they have some teleportation chambers, and that's about it. They don't have much. They tend to be behind the scenes, not directly involved as much as possible, because each time they make an action, they do something, they are exposing themselves. Yeah. They rather expose their Draco minions, let them do the dirty fight.
Yep, fair enough. Now, you provided in your last update, Cobra, that a significant portion of the Chimera group, it was down to 80 like a month ago or something, I think you said. And then your last post, a significant portion has been taken off planet by the light forces. If that's the case, are you allowed to provide any updated numbers on how many there's left?
Again, for obvious reasons, I will not give a new number, but I would say the group that is, the toughest ones are remaining for the end. So we have now a very tough, very small group, which is technologically at the very top, and but they will be dealt with summarily one way or the other as well. But I will not give any estimates, any numbers, or any time frames for various reasons.
Yeah, well done. Now, let me see here. Do either of you know if the lower level MIC, SSP, and the US Navy are working closely and or directly with the Galactic Confederation yet? Let alone the former Solar Warden, aka SSP Alliance?
Okay, I can speak for the Pleiadian Fleet. The Pleiadian Fleet is in direct contact with Putin and top military brass in Russia. This is now the only country that has direct communication link. There are plans to do this in China as well, but the United States, the situation is a little bit difficult because there is simply too much infiltration in all the groups, so the Pleiadian Fleet is very careful. They do sometimes transmit warning messages to certain factions that go too far, but that's about it at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. Go ahead, Michael.
According to the William Tompkins information, he was saying that historically there was very close cooperation between the Nordic extraterrestrials and the Navy, and that currently the Nordics are helping the Navy develop their new generation of space battle groups. That Bill Tompkins said that currently there are 8 space battle groups that are part of the Navy's Solar Warden program out there. These were developed in the 1980s and have been refurbished, but a completely new generation is being built in the 2030s, projected to be deployed, and that they have been built in full cooperation with the Nordics, who have been helping the Navy So I think that that relationship is very close. The Air Force Secret Space Program, they have been working closely with the reptilians, with the Greys, with the kind of Fourth Reich. That is a much more limited program, as I said, limited to Earth operations. And I agree with what Cobra has said. That's definitely the information I've been getting about Putin working with this Nordic group as well, that he's been given advanced technology, and that this has been why the Earth Alliance has developed such advanced technologies to parallel what the corporations were secretly able to build down in Antarctica.
Okay.
So here has something to clarify. The Pleiadians had a strong cooperation with the Navy secret space program starting in the 1950s and going on until 1996. Then there was the Archon invasion, and that connection was broken. The link was broken. What they are doing now is that they have a certain channel of communication that I will not discuss how they do it, but they have a way of providing intel to certain people within the Navy, but this link of communication is different. It's not the same as before. The structure, the way how they influence positively the Navy secret space program is different now.
Okay. I just want to, because I know people are curious, just to orientate their minds about what kind of command structure exists in relation to the Galactic Confederation, the US Navy, also referred to as the SSP Alliance, and the lower level MIC SSP that you've been alluding to is basically the Air Force. Are they still working independently with regards to the Air Force MIC SSP and the Navy US Navy SSP? Are they still very independent, or does one sort of influence the other?
So as I said, the Navy secret space program receives intel from the Pleiadians and guidance from the Pleiadians and guidance from the Galactic Confederation, but it's not direct. It's not like a command structure. It's more like an inspirational guidance. The Air Force does receive. It's more in the grip of the Chimera group. I would say that many of the remaining Chimera members are positioned within the Air Force, U.S. Air Force, and also in the militaries of other countries. You can find them even in China and Russia as well. You need to know that. Or secret services. But, so the chain of command is more direct from the Chimera group to certain top brass personnel in the Air Force. It's more like a direct command structure. And of course, the Greys, the Reptilians, the Dracos were more involved in that program in the past. And now as their numbers are diminishing, their power is diminishing, it's more like a direct transmission of power from the Chimera to the top brass in the Air Force. Okay,
interesting. I want to get a... Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Right, I just wanted to add, I agree with what Cobra has said there. I just want to add that, or emphasize what I said earlier, that there is this development with the Air Force Secret Space Program, through this document that was released earlier this year, the Defense Intelligence Agency document, where this new narrative is emerging now of the human-looking extraterrestrials actually having worked with the Air Force, having been involved in diplomatic relations. So they're presenting a new narrative, and I think that's because there are those in the Air Force hierarchy who have now thought that, well, the way disclosure is going to be rolled out is going to be one where the emphasis is going to be on human-looking extraterrestrials as being presented to us, that the whole kind of like alien invasion scenario, that doesn't have any likelihood of succeeding. So they're going to roll forward with this human-looking extraterrestrial and disclosure process. And the question is going to be whether the Air Force is going to kind of like work with that kind of the Vatican and the Jesuits in rolling out a group of human-looking extraterrestrials who really aren't allied with the kind of more positive confederation, or whether it's going to be something that is a genuinely positive confederation group. Corey Good thinks that the Vatican is ready to disclose a group of human-looking extraterrestrials that are part of the confederation. Mm-hmm. I question whether the Vatican would really do that, but I definitely think that that's a possibility.
I would say that the Palladians will not do that, and the Confederation will not do that. They will not address humanity through the Vatican. The Vatican, of course, will go along with that full disclosure process, because it will have to. But I would say that the positive extraterrestrial races are contacting anybody they can, in any ways they can, because they would like to see this planet free. So people in all walks of life everywhere are being contacted telepathically, energetically, and they will be contacted physically as well when the time comes.
Yeah, I was going to say, regarding the Vatican, for obvious reasons, they have to be watched really damn closely. And I'm sure that plan exists, the plan that you talk about, or what they're talking about in the Air Force, Michael. But I'm just concerned, I'm not sure how well they know the Vatican, how well they know Jesuits. And I'm just questioning, how well they know Jesuits and those who control. Go ahead.
They actually, the Vatican has been working with the Air Force for a long time on these issues. The Vatican has been a key force in terms of raising money for the kind of lower level secret space programs, the black budget, money laundering, and a lot of the kind of illicit mechanisms that exist out there. The Vatican has been involved in that. Also, the Vatican has been involved in sharing some of the advanced technologies with the Air Force. For example, chronovisor technology, where they can look into the future. There's a book by Father Pellegrino Anetti called the Chronovisor, and that kind of describes how the Vatican developed this chronovisor technology. And Andy Bashagor says that he actually recalls seeing Father Anetti being honoured by the CIA for having played a role in sharing this Vatican developed technology with the CIA. So, the Vatican has been working closely with the Air Force for a long time, which is why I think that, this possibility of a kind of like a human-looking group being trotted out as in a disclosure process sanctioned by the Vatican and by the Air Force is a real possibility. Whether it's a positive group or kind of imposter group, that's something we'll have to find out.
Yeah, something we'll have to watch, because I'm struggling to trust Jesuits.
I would just need to say that real disclosure will not happen through Vatican. It's not going to happen.
Okay. Well, we understand, gentlemen, that there's quite a few factions involved. It feels like half, most of the galaxy's representatives are here, and let alone all the various factions on the Earth, both positive and negative, and it gets pretty convoluted. And I'm sure there's plenty of positive factions that are willing to maybe work or humour the Vatican, and there's other positive factions that I'm sure wouldn't want to touch the Vatican and anything Jesuit with a 10,000-foot pole, and that would be understandable given their history. We better move on for the audience, I want to get a fix on this one thing. Is the Pentagon's Joint Chiefs of Staff and General Dunford as their chairman in charge, or actually have effective or literal control of the lower level MIC and the Navy SSP, for that matter? Either one of you?
No, they don't have any real influence. The Joint Chiefs of Staff is really just the administrative body that doesn't have any effective control over there's 10 combatant commands all over the planet that the US has, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff doesn't control any of those. They report directly to the Secretary of Defense and to the President. So the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they don't control either the Air Force Secret Space Program or the Navy Secret Space Program. Both of those programs, it's people within who have kind of need to know access, in the relevant compartments in the Air Force and in the Navy, who are effectively setting the policy for that. And one of the things that William Tompkins says that he was a part of was that the Navy was using these Navy West meetings in the San Diego area every year, where they would kind of have a lot of ideas shared, a lot of brainstorming, and that would kind of flow into what the Navy planned to do.
Okay, yeah. Well, thanks for clarifying that, because people have made something of a hero of General Dunford in particular, and for good reason. He does appear to be a strong leader, a genuine white hat constitutionalist patriot, and but we needed to get that information out there in terms of the broader scheme of things, in terms of what they actually are in charge of and control. Okay, moving on to let's get to the bottom of this whole thing with the P2 Freemason Lodge in Italy that we're told controls the Vatican. Now, is the P2 Freemason Lodge, is that where the heads of the black nobility 13 bloodlines families meet, or is it comprised of actual 33rd degree Freemasons that are not members of the 13 bloodline families and act independently of the bloodline families?
Actually, this lodge is just a vehicle for the bloodline families, not the only one. Many of the members do belong to the families, but many are just regular high degree Masons that meet and have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. So if for example, people who are they are climbing the ladder of Freemasonic hierarchy, before they reach 32nd level, they have no idea there is something sinister at the very top. Yeah. They have no idea of the infiltration, but then they begin to realize what they were getting themselves into. And P2 Lodge is just one of the instruments, one of the vehicles that the real Archon families use. They have other secret groups also in Rome where they meet more openly.
Okay, the 13 bloodline members, so-called descendants of these giants, right? Okay, fair enough. Now, are they above or below the Jesuits?
The real Archon families are above the Jesuits. The Jesuit organization is one of their creation, like the Inquisition was one of their creations, like Knights of Malta are their creation, for example.
I see, understood. Thanks for that clarity. Committee of 200, what state are they in now, if any?
Again, this is just one of the bodies that organizes the cabal, like the Trilateral Commission. There are different groups that are interconnected, and this is how the cabal networks. They have networks like you have trade unions, like you have many other networking groups on the positive side. They have their own networking groups. There is not one single group at the top that controls everything. It's a network. It's an interconnected network.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, moving on. Corey has been saying that the cabal have been having trouble using their AI recently to calculate probable timelines, where they would always cut off positive timelines just before the planet got onto it, through whatever means they had at their disposal, one of them being false flags, I'm sure. Do either of you have any recent info about that situation?
We had problems with this since 2012. And that problems will continue because they don't understand the light. They don't really grasp that light will be victorious, that this is going to end, and they will not be able to understand until it's over.
Okay. Michael, do you have anything on that before we move on?
Right. I think it's because we are entering this region of the galaxy where there's more higher level cosmic rays coming in, raising consciousness, or at least accelerating consciousness, where people, depending on their orientation, either become more positive or more negative. That is probably one of the factors for why this kind of technology isn't successful as in being able to predict timelines, and therefore makes it harder for the negative groups to be able to kind of anticipate, what positive changes are coming down, and
basically messing with their ability to cut it off from the past, so to speak, just before the planet goes onto that positive timeline. As I understand it. Okay, now there's been quite a few interesting, let's just say, comments, remarks by, well, for example, David Wilcock in his recent post. Summation of it is that this is the quiet before the storm. We've got full food sources, and even Trump alluding to saying that something big is coming up. Julian Assange, a recent tweet, releasing just encryption keys. And also Sean Hannity from Fox News saying there's going to be a major announcement. What is this? Does any of this have to do with the big Luciferian build-up to their most holiest day being Halloween and November 4th? And are the positive factions trying to beat them to it by doing something, let's just say, very significant?
There's different ways of looking at this calm before the storm. I know one of the things that Trump was briefed on is that the lower level secret space program has assembled a lot of its military assets over North Korea and is prepared to take out their military infrastructure very, very quickly. The air war against Iraq took about 3 weeks to kind of degrade the air defense system of the Iraqi nation or the Iraqi military. I mean, they're going to have to do the same thing to North Korea, but in a matter of minutes. And so what Trump was briefed on was kind of like rods of God technology, maser satellites, kind of like directed energy weapons, and other kinds of advanced weapon systems that he would just obliterate the military arsenal that North Korea had. But of course, and that would actually be a way for the secret space program, the lower level, to be revealed. But of course, that's not really a very desirable way of doing it. But that's, I think, what Trump meant by this calm before the storm. Okay,
Cobra, what do you have about this?
Yes, I would say that many things are being prepared behind the scenes. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but this autumn will be very interesting, very dynamic. A lot of things happening, both on the good side, on the bad side. There will be many surprises. I would just say you need to stay calm and centered whatever happens and be prepared for everything. And at this point I have to go, so I would like to thank all of you gentlemen for this interesting interview, and I wish everybody the best and victory of the light.
Thank you very much, Cobra, for your time. We do appreciate it. And let's just finish off, because this is a great segue into the true power that we hold without realizing it, without fully grasping. And that is a fundamental energetic phenomena of when we travel to the non-physical planes from our physical bodies, that we actually have a lot more power than what we would otherwise if we were to, die physically and just be on the plasma plane or etheric plane alone. And it's something that, I've found out through my own experiences as well. And the analogy that's been brought up by the late Julian Wells was how Superman, when he left his planet, and as well as some bad guys in one of those movies, the older ones from the 80s, were chasing after him, and they all come to Earth, and they found that they have these amazing powers, being in a different realm. And I also found out not too long ago that the critical healing technique of soul fragment retrieval is something you can only do while you're still in the physical or from the physical. And so what I'm trying to get to on that is, us surface light workers still have massive potential. With some basic training, we can learn to project our consciousness out onto the physical, out onto the non-physical planes, and just really use what's innately in us that's still underutilized, which is what the 144,000 reactivation campaign is centered around. So first of all, Cobra, because you know so much about the non-physical aspects of things, what do you have to say about that?
Yes, the key to our power is to connect the physical and non-physical, to bring the plan, to bring the life which is already existing in the non-physical through all the planes, piercing the plasma, anchoring into the physical body, and doing our missions. 144,000, we were born with a mission. Each of us has a mission. Do it, carry it out, and we will be successful, and we will be victorious. Victory of the life, and thank you.
Brilliantly said, Cobra. And Michael, any last words?
I feel that our power to collectively manifest the reality of our highest dreams is becoming something that is within grasp of us as more and more people embrace the information that has been shared here tonight and through the internet and videos and so forth, discussing all of this information as more people realize just how fundamentally important it is to engage with this level of information. Then we are going to collectively come together and manifest something that truly is quite amazing. And I'm looking forward to that. And thanks for putting this show together and getting Cobra to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, likewise, Michael, please keep on doing what you're doing. And it was a real pleasure meeting you at the Solar Eclipse conference at Mount Shasta, what was it, August 21st? The Full Disclosure Solar Eclipse, whatever it was called. I kept on forgetting the full title of that particular conference with Corey Good. And by all means, stay in touch if you have anything else new, interesting, or any updates. And thanks again for your time.
You're welcome. Aloha.
Okay, aloha indeed. And that was Michael Salla of ExoPolitics.org, and of course Cobra's website 2012portal.blogspot.com. And folks, there you go. I promised you it was going to be a whirlwind of a discussion and interview. We were going to ask the biggest questions and go deep, and indeed we do that. So this is the Unknown Lightwarrior. You're listening to Ground Crew Command Radio. I'll see you on the other side of this short musical break for the news portion. So stay tuned.
there you go, folks. If that's what you would call your kind of interview, then just go over to blogtalkradio.com/ground crew command radio, and just hit the pink follow button on that page. You'll see just off to the left here, and certainly share this on Facebook, because this sort of information, this sort of empowering information needs to get out there. So please share it on Facebook and go ahead and click the pink follow button on blogtalkradio.com/ground crew command radio. If you got a lot out of this fantastic roundtable discussion between myself, Cobra, and Michael Salla. So, and of course, the big move that's happening, as far as you and I are concerned, as far as we're concerned, are starseeds, light workers, practitioners, healers, goddesses, light warriors, what have you. We're rallying together, and we're going to make our presence felt like never before through the activation of the 144,000. And the recruitment center for that is at returntoyourtruth.com/144K, the letter K, returntoyourtruth.com/144K. And that's where we're going to make it. That's where you and I are really going to take charge of the planetary situation here. And I kid you not, there's how many scientific studies that have, beyond any shadow of a doubt, measured physically, empirical evidence, clinical studies about the power of mass meditation. Of course, the 144K is going to go even further than that. We're talking real, full-blown, 30-minute, possibly even 1 hour energy sessions, which is an advanced form of meditation that we can all do, that you can easily do and be a part of history. It'll be I'll be directing things in terms of what to focus on and so forth. And I have a lot of experience in doing planetary clearing sessions. The teams are going to be with us. And just to get familiar with the teams, go to the homepage of returntoyourtruth.com. Watch those couple of videos there on the right. And together, we will be unstoppable. And we're going to greatly accelerate the event so that we're not having to wait years for it, for our freedom, to be together once again with our beloved galactic family. And no more waiting, folks. Let's take charge. It's all about you and I taking charge for real at a whole new level. And Gaia and humanity is ready for this now. So let's do it. Once again, the recruitment center for the activation of the 144,000 is at returntoyourtruth.com/144K. And if for whatever reason the page isn't live yet, then just leave the tab open. Come back the following day. It will be live, and just opt in there. Okay, opt in and support this tribe, because we've now reached the energetic point, the frequency level point, where the planet's ready for this. So this is it. It's in our hands now, quite literally. The main promotional video for this. It's about a 10-minute video. That'll go live on that page in a matter of days. So just keep on returning to this page, okay, at returntoyourtruth.com/ the numbers 144 and the letter K. And, of course, once again, support this broadcast. We have unique, powerful, deep, clarifying insights and analysis and perspectives on the whole overall planetary liberation process, from the GT, from the 3D geopolitical analysis, and how all this marries with all the off-world influences to liberate this planet. So share this on Facebook, share this with friends by going to blogtalkradio.com/ground crew command radio and hit the pink follow button to get notifications of our weekly Wednesday night broadcasts. Because we've had some profound, news analysis, planetary liberation analysis, updates and interviews, just like this one. And you can download the 3 MP3s after each live broadcast as well to listen on the go from your phone. So without further ado, let's get into the news. Now, the live broadcast will cut off in about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So if you lose the line, then just wait about 20 minutes or half an hour, or maybe tomorrow, and just return back to this page. And from the top right, you see a little icon where you can right-click on it and download the recording of this show to finish listening to the news portion of the show, which is normally completed by now, but because of the length of this interview, this critical landmark interview, we're going to go into extra time, which sometimes loses the live broadcast. But this will be the recording, so just go to blogtalkradio.com and /ground crew command radio, click the pink follow button, share it on Facebook, and then right-click on the little cloud icon at the top, towards the top right, and download the recording to listen to the news portion, because this is critical, empowering clarification that's provided here on Ground Crew Command with regard to the latest chaos on the geopolitical analysis of recent goings on, and you leave each show feeling more empowered, more clarity orientated, and you know that there's nothing to fear once you know what the deal is with certain stories that get released in the alternative media mostly that causes fear, but unnecessarily so. And we're all about empowerment, inspiration, upliftment, and reactivation of your powers, okay? And that's what the 4-phase system is all about. That will be provided once you opt in at the recruitment center for the 144,000 at returntoyourtruth.com/144K. If you opt in there and let us know that, yes, I want to be a part of this by opting into that page. And on the following page, there'll be things there for your empowerment, to put it mildly. Okay, we want people bringing in as much light, as much of your light as possible during these powerful energy sessions, often referred to as meditations. This is going to be something completely different, completely new, folks. I kid you not, and this is real. So, and of course, the main promotional video for the 144,000 activation campaign, that's going to blow your mind. It'll bring some great revelations. And we'll explain a lot as well in terms of why mass meditations have had some degree of success, but not anywhere near the potential that it holds. And just want to understand those reasons why we haven't reached our true potential and why mass meditations are still the most untapped weapon for power, freedom, restoration of free will, and planetary liberation, so we can once again be a galactic family. And this is real. This is serious. It's going to happen. It's actually going to happen. So make sure you check in with your higher self, you follow your guidance, and if your higher self says, yes, it's now time, this is the main drive for that last dash to the planetary liberation finish line. If you get the go-ahead from your higher self, you know what to do. Share this radio page on Block Talk Radio and go straight to returntoyourtruth.com/144K. Opt in and let the world and all of your multidimensional selves that you're ready for freedom and ready to be a part of this, of the raising of this army of light. So let's get on with the news portion of this show. Now, okay, so the White Hats dropped the big one, the JFK files. So what are they going for here? Are they going straight for George Bush Sr., who ordered the assassination, what they commonly call wet jobs in the insider or cabal community on JFK? Well, it's all over InfoWars, which is basically the outlet for the patriot factions and positive military in the US. And no, he's not being secretly funded by the cabal or the ADL or whatever other rumours have travelled over the years. No, not the case. This is undoubtedly one of the big cards the White Hats have been waiting for to play. The Trump tweet saying, quote, subject to the receipt of further information, I will be allowing, as president, the long blocked and classified JFK files to be opened. So that's quite a shot that has been fired across the bow of the cabal, among lots of others, I understand. But, you know, one senior Pentagon source who has been, consistently reliable in the past said that, and I quote, the Trump release of JFK files may implicate Bush Sr., Mossad, the CIA, the deep state, and may be a prelude to an intel dump on 9/11. Suppress technology, the secret space program, and other disclosures prior to the mass arrests. And I would add, they would also include in that mentioning why they assassinated JFK, about the whole thing about basically replacing the Federal Reserve or competing with the Federal Reserve and printing his own treasury notes, which would bring power back to, certainly a lot of power back to the executive branch and Congress. So that's what they're going for, and releasing all of that. And to release all that information, you have to understand that there's a sequenced release of information, and they're starting with the JFK files on that one. So that's the deal there. Clearly, this is what the White Hats have been, are going for. And thanks to InfoWars, Fox News, Breitbart, the Daily Caller, and other alt media sites with big followings, they now have the media muscle needed to succeed at long last of such things.
And, you know, we've got arrests of lower-level cabal members that have certainly started, and I suspect many of them won't be held in custody, but released on parole and prevented from leaving the country to probably testify later, but also partly because, you know, they can't legally process so many people through the courts so quickly and put them in jail. You know, they'd rather do deals and get them testifying on the higher-ups who are the real targets. Now, admittedly, there's every chance that they may be just holding them in custody at God knows where, and just keeping them there until they testify. They may not necessarily be releasing them on parole deals or anything like that. I think it'll depend with each person that they've been arresting of these lower-level pedophiles and cabal members. So we're going to wait for more intel on that, and stay tuned to Ground Crew Command Radio and yours truly for more on this development. And clearly, you know, the White House have pulled that big lever and started the release of all these timed and planned, you know, information dumps, beginning with the JFK files, and it's going to go all the way to 9/11, secret space program, and so forth. That'll lead inevitably to the mass arrest. It's going to be done in an orderly, controlled way. Now, we're going to get into the fires briefly. There's been fires in recent weeks in Los Angeles, Northern California, England, Spain, Portugal, Canada, Brazil, more recently, at the Chapada dos Veadeiros. Huge forest fires there. There's strong suspicion that this is more than just arson fire, but this is the cabal actually burning their own stuff, their evidence in many cases. You have to remember, for the longest time, certainly since World War II, you had Nazi bases in the rainforests of Brazil. And that's been one of the routes to Antarctica, where they then, you know, transporting all their personal belongings, art collections, what have you, and transporting them through their underground bases in Brazil en route to Antarctica, where, as some of you know, they were then taken on board the Dark Fleet ships and taken almost out of the atmosphere over Antarctica, and they were attacked by those lower-level military-industrial complex secret space program Chevron craft, and were forced back down, as we've just discussed in this interview. So the jury is still out on that. We're still waiting for more evidence, but there's strong suspicion that the cabal are simply burning evidence, burning their own stuff that they can't carry or hide or transport. You know, they obviously can't burn things in underground bases, even in subterranean bases. You know, it's too dangerous, obviously. Too dangerous trying to contain fires in a closed environment. So they go take them to the surface and burn them. So stay tuned on that one as well, folks. That's a very interesting development, because we all know the cabal is getting very desperate, and there's signs of that everywhere. Now, we have here, let me see, the other big intel dump, information dump, which is the other big move by the White Hats, which is the intel dump on the real Russian collusion by the Clintons. That's been all over Fox News and the old media, and of course not a whiffer by the cabal media. Again, this is part of turning the tables and greatly mitigating the whole attack by the cabal through their establishment media of delegitimizing the Trump presidency, who, for the most part, is working for the Patriot faction or positive military in the US. There's little doubt about that at this stage. Like I said in past shows, the positive military, they don't have complete control over Trump. I would say to a 90% degree that they control him successfully. And so clearly, especially with regard to the Vegas massacre, where it's been revealed that a UK-based security company called G4S is in the crosshairs of the positive military as instrumental in carrying out the Vegas attack, with the bloodlines in Italy being the final target who were truly behind the Vegas attack. As I've explained in the radio show and article over that, it really was a case of the cabal firing back from a window in the Bastille because of how desperate it is. So clearly the Patriots are investigating that matter as well and collecting evidence on who was involved specifically. Now, whether they're going to do, a lawful, due process and arrest regards to that, or whether they're just going to be taking out the ones involved and the perpetrators behind that is yet to be seen. So once again, stay tuned on that one. Now, okay, so big threats by the cabal to crash the internet and the financial system to save themselves from or with the resulting chaos. And I promise to answer the question, what's the number one thing that will stop them from doing that? Because this sort of brinksmanship has occurred, and threat to carry out such a thing has occurred in the past. And I'll get to that in just a second. Well, let's be blunt about it. I'll answer the question right here. The number one thing that will stop the cabal from pulling the plug and the rug from the whole system for a full system collapse is a full-scale roundup and assault on anyone who tries to do this, okay? Because if the cabal do try to shut down the internet completely, which that alone will cause an economic collapse, and if they do crash the stock market, which will cause a chain reaction that will crash the world economy, although to a much lesser extent in China and Russia, the military will and can mobilize because it will trigger a state of emergency. And the US militia will be used to protect public assets, utilities and bridges and so forth. And a similar thing came close to happening in, if I remember correctly, December 2014. And it was stopped by the threat of the Earth Alliance to round up the cabal. In other words, trigger the mass arrests. And that's Cobra's intel at the time. But, of course, what about the plasma topper bombs? Well, which for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, it's basically antimatter bombs that the Chimera control that are on the plasma plane, and the Chimera are threatening to, detonate one of them if the mass arrests are triggered. Now, the thing to realise, and by the way, they're being cleared all the time, and there's less and less of them all the time. And once they are cleared, the mass arrests will happen, I can guarantee you that. So, I digress. But once the Chimera trigger the plasma bombs, if the Earth Alliance and the positive factions make their big move for the mass arrests and forced physical removal of the cabal, all levels of it. Well, yes, the Chimera control them, but they're going to use them to protect themselves with those at this point. Cobra has already revealed that they're already jettisoning the cabal and plan to escape Earth to fight another day. And that's on one of Cobra's recent intel releases, I think from about 2 weeks ago. You can look it up on his website. And so that's where the mind and the concerns and the priorities of the Chimera are. It's at this stage, because things have gone so far south for the Chimera, let alone the Cabal, it's pretty much, arguably, every man for himself kind of thing, everyone for themselves. And that's the situation. That's why there's good cause to get excited about the 144,000 activation campaign and to enlist in that, to join in on that by opting in on that page, because, you know, just a few big moves on our part by taking charge of the energetics, which is the biggest influencer of pretty much everything, you know, we can just give it that last nudge over the cliff, metaphorically speaking. So that's where the mind and priorities of the Chimera are. It's really now to save themselves, and that's what they're primarily going to use the types of toppler bombs for. You know, not so much about saving the Cabal, because they're all obviously, again, made the decision per Cobra's intel release from 2 weeks ago to let go of the Cabal. Now, moving on. And of course, you can leave a comment on what you think about this on the article blog post for this radio show that you'll see at returntoyourtruth.com/blog. Leave a comment there. Tell me what you think. And of course, share that article that promotes this radio episode and broadcast as well. So, next, there's literally thousands of pedophiles that have been arrested worldwide, and their testimonies, and they're collecting testimonies to move this dragnet up the food chain begins, you know, with perpetrators like Bill Clinton and former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair being just two of the targets. That's going on as well. And just to touch on concerns, some big concerns from last week, you know, where about, well, I've got over here, Trump caves in on positive military pressure not to start war with Iran. Okay, let's lay that thing to rest with regards to Iran. And as we've seen, the Cabal can still threaten and blackmail Trump, or try to, but the positive military can stop any such actions by the Cabal, sometimes through Trump. And they really have lost too much power to be able to trigger this. God knows they've tried in the past. And again, through the 144,000, we can even reduce the likelihood of any significant conflict even further. Now, last week there was an intel release about, well, it raised the question of how can a possible summit meeting between President Trump and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un realistically lead to a peace deal as well as reunification of the Korean Peninsula, thus stripping away one of the biggest assets the Cabal has, causing even greater loss of power and capacity for an accelerated defeat. You know, so what can we expect Cabal control of North Korea to do about this? And how can the Earth Alliance wrestle control of North Korea away from the Cabal? So, North Korea, as you may know, is a major income source for the Cabal because that's where the world supply of amphetamines comes from. Then you got the North Korean version of FEMA camps there that darkness certainly doesn't want to shut down because they're receiving so much energy from the pain of these concentration camps in North Korea. Of course, I'm referring to the non-physical darkness. So they're not going to let North Korea go easily. So the trick needs to be to get the dictatorship and the military of North Korea to switch sides. And if the Earth Alliance can figure out how to pull that off without having to force it through an Iraq 2003 style invasion, which was all over in 3 weeks, with the use of off-world or hidden black technology that can literally stop artillery, guns and missiles from firing a single bullet, literally. They will. So attempts will be made to make an offer to Kim Jong-un that will be more attractive to him than staying with the cabal. So it could work. If the positive military can keep in check likely cabal attempts to sabotage this move to liberate both Japan, not just North Korea, with this peaceful attempt. So the Earth Alliance and the positive military, they are trying the peaceful methods, negotiation methods, as disclosed by one of Fulford's sources about the negotiation for a possible summit between the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un and President Trump. Obviously, so that shows that they're trying and to do it peacefully and forceful removal being the last resort, because there's a lot that the cabal has in North Korea very safely, a lot of important assets, and it's important to strip them of that somehow, to weaken them even further. Now, there's been some upset, understandably so, in our awake and aware world with regards to good old Henry Kissinger being successfully cornered into a, seemingly, let's just say for now, seemingly cornered into a, quote, work for us, do the right thing, or else, unquote, kind of situation. As he assists negotiations and in setting up meetings around the world for this so-called new international architecture that will better accommodate the needs of a post-event world. Indeed, is that what's really going on, or is he trying to weasel his way into surviving the mass arrests and fight for any amount of influence he can keep to fight for his Luciferian gods some other day? Well, right now, his biggest concern and focus is not to end up getting arrested or taken out like John D. Rockefeller or Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's evil, but he's not stupid, and probably not a religious zealot with regards to fighting for his Nazi and Luciferian belief system at all costs. He's smart enough and self-centered enough to follow the old motto, if you can't beat him, join him. And he may either be hoping for an opportunity to crawl his way back to power and influence sometime after the mass arrests, which obviously won't happen, or he just sees that it's all lost and is trying to get the lightest possible sentence or escape arrest altogether by helping with the transition into the post-mass arrest era. Either way, he has to be very closely watched because morals and ethics are not his strong points, to say the least, and he'll take a better option for himself that's not for humanity's highest good if that opportunity was to present itself. He is a Draco incarnate after all. So, like the Jesuits, the Earth Alliance and the positive military will just keep the pressure on them and use them if they can't shut them down or take them out or arrest them as of now. Now, one thing I do want to clarify about the whole Jewish mafia thing, okay, and the use of the word Jewish mafia, or Jewish, or Jew, as it relates to the cabal. And I suppose that begs the question, is Zionist power often unfairly referred to as Jewish mafia in the US really finished? Well, doing things like being able to prevent a high-level Zionist like Harvey Weinstein from fleeing the US was previously unheard of in decades past. So we must, it must take nothing short of great power and consolidation of this power as the overriding controlling force here in the US by the positive military to be able to do something like that. So with such strong indicators like that, it could well be true that Zionist power is done here in the US, and they're just going through the process of exposure, lawful arrest, and due process. And they will use force if that takes too long or doesn't work for each particular Zionist individual. Now, it's important not to refer to them as the Jewish mafia because it unfairly alienates the Jewish majority, regardless of what you think about their religion, who are either, and many of them are either actively fighting or at the very least hating the cabal as much as any of us. There were plenty of Germans fighting the Nazis until Hitler's 9/11 false flag version of the Nazi takeover of Germany. So it's the same thing here, where not all Germans were Nazis, but all Nazis were German. So not all Jews are Zionists, but certainly most Zionists are Jews. Once again, it's a tiny clique of elitists at the top, manipulating the majority of innocent Jewish people that don't know any better, but like us, they're waking up too. And I remember seeing at a David Icke conference some time ago a sign of he was at a protest, a sign of a rabbi, holding up a sign saying Zionism is not Judaism. And, in a big crowd of mostly rabbis, it seemed, and he was not looking very happy at all. So it's important to have perspective on that, folks. Now, let's move on to NSA recordings. With the NSA recordings to prove it, will Pope Francis admit that a fellow Jesuit was behind the Fukushima false flag attack, including boasts by said Jesuit that he was Satan? And he will, if he can figure out how to do it without this exposure destroying the image and reputation of the Vatican and the Jesuit order towards the unconscious public, because I don't see how the Jesuits and the Vatican can survive that kind of exposure of something so massive, so close to home. In other words, being done by one of their own. And it will also require Pope Francis betraying this fellow Jesuit, Peter Hans Kolvenbach, who was the previous Black Pope, also known as the head of the Jesuits. So he'll be calculating what's worse, to do it or not to do it. Of course, don't hold your breath, because at this level, Luciferians are religious zealots. Okay, I don't see how he can, bite through pressure from the various positive factions and the White Dragon Society. I don't see how he would be able to bring himself to expose this. It'll do too much damage to the Jesuit order and the Vatican. So I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. Now, to answer the question why a 100-meter tsunami hitting the east coast of the US and the south coast of Europe from an earthquake-triggered rock slide into the ocean at La Palma will never work, and is mainly just saber rattling by the Gnostic Illuminati. Now, I generally salute, revere, and admire the Gnostic Illuminati, but they can be aggressive, understandably so, at times, and do a lot of saber rattling. And yes, sometimes the cabal needs to, be at the receiving end of this saber rattling. However, this isn't really going to work, or be for our highest good, because this 100-meter tsunami slamming into the east coast of the US and west or southwest coast of Europe, it supports, such an event would support what the cabal have been trying to do to the US with its hurricanes, to force the positive factions here into some degree of submission through such catastrophes. Yes, it will wipe the cabal power centers of New York City and the District of Columbia, the DC Corporation, and take many of them out, but the loss of even more awakening innocent Americans strongly suggests that this is really just saber rattling by the Gnostics. I wouldn't put too much stock in it. Of course, if things get serious enough, extreme enough, which really we're off that timeline now, the Gnostic Illuminati will threaten that against the cabal. Understandably so. So, folks, that's the news portion. I've had to cram in 2 weeks worth of news into this week's episode. Once again, join us next week for the next breakthrough blockbuster episode of Ground Crew Command Radio, because indeed we are one of the leading broadcasts out there for giving you not just clarity through proper analysis, but empowerment and raising your overall frequency and confidence and strength in this overall process and war, both physical and non-physical, to liberate this planet. And if you're serious about wanting to make this process so much quicker, to get to the event, to get to the mass arrest so much quicker, you know what to do. Check with your higher self. And then further, and then go to returntoyourtruth.com/144K. Opt in. The promotional video may not be ready, but that will be ready in a few days. But opt in on that page and say, yes, I want to be a part of mass meditations that yours truly will be organising, probably on this Blog Talk platform, where we'll all be doing more powerful and advanced versions of mass meditations, basically, that may go well over 15 minutes, and it'll be done at a minimum once a month, at a maximum once a week, and or during astrological alignments, astrological events, or significant 3D events. It's time for you and I to take charge, for real, at a whole new level. So, this is the Unknown Lightwarrior. You've been listening to Ground Crew Command Radio, your weekly dose of empowering clarity, inspiration, and motivation to get you through the Archon Invented Work Week. And folks, it's been an honour giving you this broadcast. I will see you. Don't forget to click the follow button to get show reminders every Wednesday, or Tuesday, I should say. And you get free MP3 downloads of any missed shows at blogtalkradio.com/Ground Crew Command Radio. hit the follow, the pink follow button there. Facebook, share all of this. And let's get the word out. Let's raise the army of light. And no, this is one army of light that's not going to get infiltrated by anti-ultra victims or physical or non-physical darkness. I've got a wealth of experience with that and stopping that and spotting that, more importantly. So no need to worry about that, folks. This is very exciting stuff because we can really take charge. And see you next Wednesday. This is the Unknown Lightwarrior. You've been listening to Ground Crew Command Radio, signing off. Till next time, stay strong and stay tuned.